It was a quiet morning at the city airport. People were standing in line at gate 17, waiting to board their flight. Some were talking. Some were checking their phones. Others were just tired. Among them stood a woman. She was not very tall. Her clothes were simple: plain shirt, old scarf, small brown bag. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't talking. She just stood there with her ticket in her hand, looking out the window at the airplane outside. Nobody noticed her at first, until the officer walked in. He was tall, strong, and proud in his blue airport uniform. His name tag read Officer Grayson. He walked with a straight back and a loud voice. He looked around the gate. Then his eyes stopped on the woman. He walked straight toward her. "You there," he said loudly. "May I see your ticket and ID?" The woman looked up. Her voice was calm. "Yes, of course." She handed him the ticket and her passport. He stared at them for a second, then looked back at her. "This ticket is business class," he said with a smirk. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" "Yes," she answered. He laughed, not kindly. "Business class," he said, turning slightly so others could hear. "You sure about that, ma'am?" People nearby turned their heads. Some looked confused. Some started whispering. The woman didn't say anything more. She simply stood there, holding her small bag close. Officer Grayson narrowed his eyes. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Washington," she replied softly. "Why?" "I'm going to meet my husband." "Your husband?" he repeated with a raised eyebrow. "And who is he?" She didn't answer that question. The officer looked at the passport again. "Do you even speak English?" he asked. Now people were watching more openly. One man muttered, "What's going on?" Another whispered, "Maybe she did something." The woman still didn't speak, not because she was guilty, but because she had nothing to prove. Officer Grayson shook his head. "Your clothes don't match this ticket. Your story doesn't make sense. Are you trying to board someone else's flight?" "No," she said firmly. He took a step closer. "Where did you buy this ticket?" "Online. Last week." "Prove it." The woman opened her bag slowly and took out her phone. Her hands were steady. She showed him the email confirmation. The officer looked at it. Still, he wasn't satisfied. "This is strange," he said. "Very strange. Are you carrying any cash?" The woman gave him a confused look. "Excuse me. I asked if you're carrying cash. Some people buy expensive tickets with stolen money, you know." Now the crowd was getting uncomfortable. A teenage girl started recording with her phone. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman whispered, "Why doesn't she just say who her husband is?" But the woman didn't shout. She didn't argue. She only looked at Officer Grayson with eyes full of something strange. Not anger, not fear, but quiet strength. And then, in a soft voice, she said, "My husband is coming." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" he said. "And who exactly is your husband?" The woman looked past him, toward the hallway leading to security. She didn't smile. She just said again, calmly, "You'll know when he walks in." The air at gate 17 felt heavier now. Passengers were watching. Phones were out. The officer stood tall, arms crossed, still looking at the woman like she didn't belong there. Her simple clothes, her quiet tone, her calm face, it all bothered him. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She just kept saying, "My husband is coming." Officer Grayson let out a short, annoyed laugh. He spoke louder now, for others to hear. "Well, I hope he comes quickly. You're holding up the line." A few passengers chuckled. Others looked away, uncomfortable. The woman didn't move. She stood still, eyes focused on the hallway. And then, footsteps. Heavy, fast, confident footsteps. Someone was walking down the airport hallway. Not in a rush, but with purpose. A tall man appeared at the corner. He wore a black coat over a military uniform. His chest carried medals. His shoes were polished. His face was serious. People turned to look. Their eyes widened. The teenage girl who had been recording whispered, Is that a general?" The officer didn't recognize him right away. The man walked straight toward the woman. She saw him. For the first time, she smiled. Just a little. The man came beside her, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and looked directly at Officer Grayson. "Is there a problem with my wife?" he asked, in a deep, firm voice. Silence. Complete silence. Officer Grayson blinked, confused. Your wife?" he asked. "Yes," the man said calmly. "Is there a reason she's being questioned in public? Is there a reason she hasn't boarded yet?" Grayson straightened his back. "I was just, checking her documents, making sure everything was okay." The man didn't move. He looked at the officer with sharp, steady eyes. "Her documents are fine. She doesn't need to explain why she's flying business class. She doesn't need to answer personal questions in front of a crowd." Grayson opened his mouth, but no words came out. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. He held it up for the officer to see. His voice stayed calm, but there was power behind every word. "My name is Colonel David Bennett. I just returned from overseas. She's my wife. And you just embarrassed her in front of a full terminal." Gasps echoed from the crowd. A few people clapped softly. The officer looked at the ID card. His face changed. His shoulders dropped. I didn't know," he stammered. "You didn't ask," the colonel replied coldly. He turned to his wife. "Are you all right?" She nodded gently. He looked around the gate. He noticed the stairs, the phones, the silence. Then he stepped forward and said clearly, "I've served my country for 20 years. My wife has stood by my side through every storm. She deserves respect, not suspicion." Nobody spoke, not even Officer Grayson. The colonel turned to the officer one last time. "You judged her by her clothes, by her silence. You saw a quiet woman and thought she was weak." He paused. "But you didn't know who you were dealing with." The woman didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her husband had said enough. They walked toward the gate together, hand in hand. As they passed, people stepped aside. Some nodded with respect. Others looked away, ashamed. The teenage girl stopped recording. She whispered, "That was amazing." Officer Grayson stood still, face red, unable to move. One of the other staff members walked up beside him. "Dude, you just embarrassed a colonel's wife," he said. Grayson swallowed hard. He had made a mistake, and the whole world was watching. Officer Grayson sat alone in the small airport security office. The room was quiet, but his heart was loud. He stared at the screen in front of him. The video of himself yelling, mocking, and doubting a calm, kind woman. He watched it again and again. Each time, it felt worse. A knock came at the door. His supervisor walked in with 2 other officers. "Grayson, sit up," the supervisor said firmly. Grayson stood quickly, nervous. "I know I messed up," he said. "I didn't mean." "That's the problem." The supervisor cut him off. "You didn't mean to, but you did it anyway. And it wasn't the first time." Grayson's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" The other officer stepped forward and dropped a small file on the desk. 3 previous complaints, he said. All about the same thing, judging people too fast, speaking down to them, acting like you're better. Grayson looked down. He had no words. This time, the supervisor said, the whole world saw it. Back at the lounge, Leah sipped tea quietly. She had no idea what was happening in the security office, and she didn't care. She wasn't thinking about punishment. She wasn't seeking revenge. She just wanted peace. But her husband, Colonel Bennett, had made a call. Not to punish, but to educate. Earlier that day, after seeing the video, he had spoken to the airport board. "I'm not asking for the man to be fired," the colonel had said. But I am asking for better training. For everyone. No one else should go through what my wife did. The board had listened. They knew they had to act. Grayson stood still as his supervisor spoke again. You're suspended for now, and before you come back, you'll attend full behavior and bias training. Real training, not a 2-hour video. Grayson nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? The supervisor asked. Because next time, the world might not be so kind. Outside, the airport buzzed with quiet excitement. Passengers who had witnessed everything were still talking. Some were crying. Some were learning. A man in a business suit said, that officer made a fool of himself. But an older woman replied, yes, but maybe now he'll become better. Grayson left the office with his badge in a small envelope. His walk through the airport was slow, heavy. People stared at him now. Not with respect. Not with power. But with disappointment. He passed the gate where it all happened. It was empty now. But the moment still lived there. At the lounge, Leah and David were called for boarding. They stood up, holding hands. As they walked past the waiting area, a few passengers clapped quietly. Leah blushed, but smiled gently. She didn't want fame. She just wanted kindness. Suddenly, someone called out behind her. Mrs. Bennett. She turned. It was a young man in a pilot's uniform. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, for how you handled everything. My mother always told me, people show their true strength in silence. And today, I saw that. Leah smiled again. Tell your mother she raised a good man, she said. As they stepped onto the plane, a new flight attendant greeted them with a warm smile. Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. Your seats are ready, and the captain asked to thank you personally. They nodded politely. For the first time that day, Leah sat down, closed her eyes, and exhaled deeply. The storm had passed, but its message was still echoing. In another part of the airport, Grayson sat alone on a bench. He pulled out his phone and searched her name. Leah Bennett. What he found made his hands shake. Stories of her saving lives. Helping soldiers. Training young nurses. He looked at her photo and whispered, I judged you. And I was wrong. The plane was in the air now. Leah Bennett sat by the window, her husband beside her. She stared at the clouds. The sunlight touched her face, but her thoughts were far away. She wasn't thinking about the officer. She wasn't thinking about the video. She was thinking about her life, and how one quiet moment had suddenly made the world listen. The flight attendant came by with a gentle smile. Would you like anything to drink, Mrs. Bennett? Leah smiled. Just some water, please. The woman nodded, but before she left, she whispered, Thank you for who you are. Leah blinked, a little surprised, but she said softly, You're welcome. Down on the ground, things were changing. News reporters were digging into Leah's past, not to invade her life, but to understand who she truly was. They found articles from years ago. A nurse who saved children in a war zone. A woman who trained dozens of young medical workers. A volunteer who helped rebuild homes after a flood. A widow who raised her son alone until she remarried. Her story spread across TV screens, newspapers, and blogs. Headlines read, Quiet woman at airport turns out to be a hero. Grace under pressure. The story of Leah Bennett. Officer's mistake reveals a woman of strength. Young people began sharing her words. That small sentence she said before her husband arrived. My husband is coming. It became a symbol, not of power, but of dignity. People turned it into poems, short videos, and even art. Some said, she didn't yell, she didn't fight. She simply stood with truth. In her hometown, the mayor announced something new. We will name the new community clinic after Leah Bennett, a woman who served others quietly and with honor. Even her old hospital put her photo up near the entrance. Below it, a quote. Kindness is not weakness. It is strength in its highest form. Back on the plane, Leah held her husband's hand. "Why do they care now?" she asked softly. "I've been doing this work for years." Colonel Bennett smiled. "Because now they've finally seen you." She nodded slowly. "I didn't want this attention." "I know," he said. "But maybe someone out there needed to see you, so they could believe in quiet strength again." At the airport below, Officer Grayson had started his training. He sat in a classroom, listening to a speaker talk about bias, respect, and human dignity. For the first time, he wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He was listening. Because now he knew. He had looked at someone and only seen her clothes, her skin, her silence. He hadn't seen her heart. He promised himself he would never do that again. Meanwhile, Leah and David's flight landed. As they walked into the terminal, more people recognized her. Some wanted photos. Some just wanted to say thank you. But Leah remained gentle, kind, and calm. She hugged an older woman who said, "You remind me of my sister. She passed away helping others too." She smiled at a child who waved and said, "You're a hero." But when a reporter asked, "What do you want the world to know about you?" she simply said, "I want them to remember the power of staying calm and the strength that lives in quiet people." That night, back at home, Leah sat on her porch with her husband. The stars were out. The world had changed, but she hadn't. She was still Leah Bennett, a nurse, a helper, a quiet woman with a powerful legacy. 1 week later, Leah Bennett stood again in an airport. But this time, she wasn't flying. She was there by invitation. The airport officials had called her days earlier. "Mrs. Bennett, we'd be honored if you would return. We'd like to make things right." At first, she didn't want to go back. She didn't like attention. But her husband had smiled and said, "Sometimes, healing comes from returning." So she agreed. The same terminal. The same gate. Gate 17. The place where it all happened. As she walked in, people turned quietly. They recognized her. Not from a scandal. Not from a fight. But from her strength. This time, no officer stopped her. No one questioned her clothes, her ticket, or her purpose. Instead, she was met by the airport director, a woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Mrs. Bennett, welcome," she said softly. "I hope today will feel different." Leah smiled gently. "It already does." Then came the surprise. The director led her to a small ceremony near the gate. There was a new sign being installed. Covered in cloth, a small crowd had gathered. Passengers, airport workers, reporters, even security officers. Leah looked confused. "What's this?" The director stepped forward. "A reminder," she said, "of how one moment can change everything." She pulled the cloth off the sign, and there it was. Gate 17, the Leah Bennett Honor Gate, in honor of kindness, calm courage, and quiet strength. Gasps filled the terminal. Some clapped, others wiped tears. Leah stood still, shocked. Her hand slowly went to her chest. She wasn't used to this kind of praise. She had saved lives before, quietly, helped people without asking for thanks. But now, the world had paused to thank her. A familiar face stepped forward next. It was Officer Grayson. But he looked very different. No uniform, no badge, just a simple shirt and tie. He spoke into the microphone. "I'm the officer who got it wrong." The room went quiet. "I judged a woman because I didn't stop to see her heart. But that day changed me. And I want to say this, in front of everyone. I am sorry." He turned to Leah. "Thank you for not yelling, for not fighting, for showing grace. I will never forget it." Leah looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Use your new eyes well," she said. Grayson bowed his head. Later, as people took photos of the new sign, a small girl walked up to Leah. She looked about 10 years old. "Miss Leah," she whispered, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Leah knelt down and smiled at her. "You already can be," she said. "Just stay kind, even when people aren't." As Leah and David walked out of the airport, the sun was setting. Soft golden light filled the sky. David looked at her and said, "You never raised your voice, but the whole world heard you." Leah smiled and replied, "Maybe the world is ready to hear quiet people now." They walked into the evening, hand in hand. No drama, no noise, just peace, and a legacy that would live far beyond Gate 17. The airport returned to normal, but something had changed. People were still whispering, still watching. The quiet woman, now sitting beside her husband near the gate, had become the center of attention, not because she was loud, but because she had stayed calm in the storm. Her name was Leah Bennett, and no one at the gate had any idea who she truly was. Leah looked out the window, watching the plane's wheels turn slowly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. This wasn't the first time someone judged her because of how she looked. But this time was different, because now the world had seen it. A little girl walked past with her mother and waved at Leah. "You're very strong," the girl whispered. Leah smiled kindly. "Thank you." Her husband, Colonel David Bennett, sat beside her, his eyes focused on the people still staring. But Leah touched his hand. "Don't be angry," she said softly. "They don't know my story." He looked at her. "Then maybe it's time they do." Flashback, 10 years earlier. Leah wasn't always the wife of a colonel. She was a nurse, a single mother, and a survivor. She had grown up in a small town, raised by her grandmother. Her father had passed away when she was 10, and her mother worked 2 jobs just to feed them. Life was never easy. She worked hard, studied harder, and even when she had nothing, she helped others. During the war overseas, Leah volunteered with a medical team. She treated wounded soldiers, fed children in destroyed villages, worked long nights without sleep. That's where she met David. He was injured in the field, bullet in the leg, bleeding badly. Leah stayed with him for hours, keeping him alive. He remembered her soft voice, her steady hands, her strength. Months later, they met again, by chance. He had healed. She was working at a veterans hospital. This time, he was the one who couldn't stop staring. "You saved my life," he told her. "No," she said, smiling. "You saved yourself. I just helped a little." They fell in love slowly, carefully. She was quiet and gentle. He was tough and proud. But they balanced each other like wind and fire. They got married in a small ceremony with only family and close friends. She didn't want anything big. She just wanted peace. Back to the airport, Leah took a deep breath. All that she had gone through, every pain, every struggle, was in her heart. She looked around at the people still watching her. Most of them didn't know anything about her. They only saw what she wore, how she talked, how she stood still when the officer mocked her. They thought she was weak. But inside, she carried stories of pain, strength, and service. She had saved lives. She had buried friends. She had raised a son alone while her husband served far away. She had earned her seat in any class she chose. One of the gate agents walked over, nervous. "Ma'am," she said softly, "we'd like to offer you and your husband a private lounge while you wait, free of charge." Leah shook her head politely. "No, thank you. We're fine here." The agent looked embarrassed, nodded, and walked away. Leah leaned over to David. "I'm not here to hide. Let them see who I am." On a nearby bench, the teenage girl who had been recording earlier looked up from her phone. "Mom," she said, "this video has 100,000 views already." The mother looked surprised. "What video?" "The one with the officer and the lady. Everyone's talking about it." Back in the crowd, Officer Grayson stood behind a wall, holding his radio. He had just been called to the supervisor's office. He didn't know what they'd say. But deep down, he knew he had gone too far. Leah leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, They judged me because they didn't know me. But now, they will. Inside the airport, the mood had changed. The crowd at Gate 17 was quieter, more thoughtful. Some passengers still glanced at Leah Bennett and her husband, Colonel David Bennett. Others stared at their phones, reading and realizing. Because now, the truth was spreading. Fast. It started with one video, only 45 seconds long. The teenage girl who had filmed Officer Grayson questioning Leah had posted it online. She had written, "This officer embarrassed a quiet woman at the airport." Then her husband walked in. Watch what happens. Within 1 hour, the video had over 1 million views. Comments started flooding in. "She handled it with so much grace. That officer needs training. She said more with her silence than he did with his shouting. Can someone find out who she is? Respect to the colonel and his wife." News blogs picked it up. People were sharing it across the country. Leah didn't know. She was just sitting quietly, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for her flight. But Officer Grayson knew. He had been called into the airport supervisor's office. He stood, nervous, sweating, as 2 senior officers looked at him across a desk. "Is this you in the video?" the supervisor asked. Grayson nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." The other officer crossed his arms. "You assumed she couldn't afford that ticket. You questioned her in front of dozens of passengers. You embarrassed her, without any real reason." Grayson swallowed hard. "I didn't know who she was." "You didn't need to know," the supervisor said sharply. "You should treat everyone with respect." Back at the gate, Colonel Bennett's phone buzzed. A message from a friend in Washington read, "David, your wife is going viral." He looked at Leah. She was sipping water, calmly watching a plane take off outside. He smiled. She had always hated attention, never chased fame. She did her work quietly, helped people without needing thanks. And now, millions were seeing her for who she truly was. An airline manager walked up to them. He looked nervous, but respectful. "Colonel Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, I saw the video. I'm very sorry for what happened earlier." Leah looked at him calmly. The manager continued, "The CEO of the airline has asked me to personally apologize. You both are welcome to use our first-class lounge, and we'd like to upgrade you to first row, private cabin seating." Leah looked at her husband. He smiled. This time, she nodded. "All right. Thank you." As they were escorted to the lounge, passengers began to stand. One by one, a woman with a baby stood and placed her hand on her heart. A young man with headphones nodded in respect. The teenage girl who had filmed the video stood up, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Leah paused. She touched the girl's shoulder gently. "Be kind. Always," Leah said. The lounge was quiet and peaceful. Colonel Bennett looked at Leah and said, "You changed more today by staying calm than most people do by shouting." Leah shook her head softly. "I didn't want to change anything," she replied. "I just wanted to fly home." But the world was already changing around her. Across the country, news anchors were playing the clip. Teachers were showing the video in classrooms. One veteran posted, "That woman treated my brother in Iraq. She's not just strong. She's a hero." A hospital nurse wrote, "She trained me. I never forgot her kindness." People were finally starting to see. She wasn't just the colonel's wife. She was Leah Bennett, a woman of strength, grace, and quiet courage. And her story was just beginning.